On August 10, 1920, inside the porcelain town of Sèvres, just outside Paris, the Ottoman Empire was asked to sign away the world it had once ruled. For the Kurds, scattered across mountains from Anatolia to Mesopotamia and Persia, the treaty contained something almost unimaginable: a legal path toward autonomy and possibly independence. It was not a clear promise of a country tomorrow. It was conditional, narrow, and shaped by allied interests. Yet for a people long governed through empires, tribes, religious orders, and local chiefs, it placed the word Kurdistan inside international diplomacy. 3 years later, that door was closed. The Treaty of Lausanne, signed on July 24, 1923, recognized the new Republic of Turkey and made no provision for a Kurdish homeland. The map that had briefly seemed unfinished was sealed by stronger armies, colder diplomacy, and priorities of states. From that reversal came one of the central conflicts of the modern Middle East: a nation without a state, divided among Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and Syria, forced to negotiate its survival under 4 flags. Before the First World War, Kurdish society was not a single political machine. It was a network of tribes, towns, clerics, landlords, and local notables. Some Kurds served the Ottoman state. Others resisted it. Some imagined autonomy under the Sultan. Others began to speak the newer language of nationalism. Kurdish newspapers and societies appeared in the late Ottoman period, but they did not yet command one unified movement. Then came war. The Ottoman defeated in 1918 shattered the empire. British troops occupied Mesopotamia. French forces moved into Syria. Greek forces landed at Smyrna in 1919. At the Paris Peace Conference, Kurdish claims were carried most visibly by Sharif Pasha, a former Ottoman diplomat who argued that Kurds were a distinct people entitled to political recognition. But Kurdish representation was weak and divided. Kurdish communities disagreed over borders, leadership, and relations with Armenians, Turks, and the Allied powers. The Allies listened, but they listened through the filter of strategy. Sèvres reflected that contradiction. Articles 62, 63, and 64 did not simply draw an independent Kurdistan on the map. Article 62 called for a commission appointed by Britain, France, and Italy to draft local autonomy for predominantly Kurdish areas east of the Euphrates, south of Armenia, and north of the frontier with Syria and Mesopotamia. Article 63 required the Ottoman government to accept that arrangement. Article 64 went further. Within 1 year, if the Kurdish population in those areas showed a majority desire for independence, and if the League of Nations judged them capable of it, Turkey agreed to renounce rights over the territory. Even this pathway left major limits. It did not include Iranian Kurdish regions. It treated the Mosul area, rich in oil and under British control, separately. It depended on a League of Nations process that had not yet proved it would protect stateless peoples against powerful states. Still, the psychological force was immense. Sèvres gave Kurdish nationalists a document they could point to and say, "The world once acknowledged us." But while diplomats debated borders, power was shifting on the ground. Mustafa Kemal, later Atatürk, led the Turkish national movement from Anatolia against Allied occupation, Greek advances, and the authority of the Sultan's government. His movement rejected Sèvres as a death sentence for the Turkish homeland. Many Muslim Kurds initially joined or supported the nationalist struggle, believing they were defending a shared Muslim country against partition. The Turkish victory transformed the diplomatic table. Greek forces were defeated in 1922. The Sultanate was abolished. The Allies, exhausted by war and unwilling to fight a new Turkish army, returned to negotiation. By the time the Lausanne Conference opened, Sèvres was no longer a realistic peace settlement. It was a defeated document. At Lausanne, Turkish negotiators pressed for sovereignty, secure borders, and freedom from foreign control. Britain cared about Iraq and the oil question around Mosul. France and Italy wanted stability and commercial access. None was prepared to make Kurdish autonomy a central demand. The result was devastatingly simple. Lausanne recognized Turkey's borders and included protections for non-Muslim minorities, but it did not name the Kurds. A people who had appeared in the diplomatic text of 1920 disappeared from the settlement of 1923. That absence mattered as much as any border line. In Turkey, the new republic built a centralized national identity around Turkishness. Kurdish language, identity, and rebellion were often treated as threats to unity. In Iraq, Britain incorporated Kurdish areas into a new state ruled from Baghdad, while Kurdish leaders pressed for autonomy. In Syria, French mandate borders placed Kurdish communities inside another new political unit. In Iran, Kurdish regions remained under a state that also pursued centralization and control. The Kurdish homeland had not simply failed to become independent. It had been divided into separate state systems, each with its own army, laws, schools, prisons, and security fears. Resistance began almost immediately. In Turkey, the Sheikh Said rebellion of 1925 combined Kurdish grievances, religious anger, and resistance to the secularizing state. It was crushed and repression deepened. The Ararat revolt followed in the late 1920s and early 1930s. Dersim in 1937 and 1938 ended in mass violence by the Turkish state against a Kurdish Alevi region. In Iraq, Sheikh Mahmoud Barzani declared Kurdish authority around Suleymania during the British Mandate period, but British power and Baghdad's ambitions limited him. Later, Mustafa Barzani became the central figure of Iraqi Kurdish resistance. A 1970 autonomy agreement promised recognition within Iraq, but disputes over territory, oil, and implementation broke it apart. In 1975, after Iran and Iraq reached the Algiers Agreement, Iranian support for Barzani collapsed, and the Kurdish revolt suffered a major defeat. The worst violence came under Saddam Hussein. During the Anfal campaign of 1988, Iraqi forces destroyed villages, deported civilians, and used chemical weapons, including at Halabja. For Kurds, Anfal was not only state repression. It was proof of what statelessness could mean when no border, treaty, or alliance guaranteed protection. In Iran, Kurdish hopes rose briefly after the Second World War, with the Republic of Mahabad declared in January 1946 under Soviet protection. Qazi Muhammad led it. Mustafa Barzani found refuge there. But when Soviet forces withdrew, Iran retook the city and Qazi Muhammad was hanged in March 1947. In Syria, Kurds faced denial of citizenship from many after a 1962 census in Hasaka, restrictions on identity, and Arabization policies in border areas. Yet the Syrian civil war changed the balance. As Damascus withdrew from parts of the north after 2011, Kurdish-led forces built autonomous administrations and later became crucial partners of the United States against ISIS. Across the region, the Kurdish struggle changed form. It was no longer only tribal revolt. It became party organization, guerrilla war, parliamentary politics, cultural revival, women's mobilization, diaspora activism, and digital memory. In Turkey, the PKK, founded by Abdullah Öcalan in 1978, launched an insurgency in 1984. The conflict killed tens of thousands and reshaped Turkish security policy. Turkey, the United States, and the European Union designated the PKK a terrorist organization, while many Kurds saw the broader movement as a response to denied identity and state violence. This is where the phrase Sèvres syndrome carries modern weight. In Turkish political language, it describes the fear that foreign powers are always seeking to divide Turkey, as they tried to do in 1920. For many Turkish nationalists, Kurdish autonomy near Turkey's borders is not just a local issue. It is the return of a historical nightmare. That fear helps explain why Ankara has repeatedly launched military operations against Kurdish armed groups in northern Iraq and northern Syria, often using drones, air power, and intelligence warfare. For Kurds, the memory works in the opposite direction. Sèvres is not a nightmare. It is evidence that statehood was once placed within reach and then traded away. One side remembers attempted partition, the other remembers abandoned recognition. The same treaty became two political myths, both powerful, both dangerous when turned into certainty. The 21st century gave Kurds moments of opportunity. After the 2003 United States invasion of Iraq, the Kurdistan region gained constitutional recognition inside federal Iraq. In 2017, it held an independence referendum, in which the official results showed overwhelming support for independence. But Baghdad neighboring states, and outside powers rejected unilateral separation. Iraqi forces moved into disputed areas, including Kirkuk, and the Kurdish leadership was forced back into negotiation. In Syria, Kurdish-led administrations survived through alliances, battlefield discipline, and the weakness of the central state. But their future remained uncertain, caught between Damascus, Ankara, Washington, Moscow, and local Arab communities. In Iran, Kurdish parties remained under pressure, while protests over rights and state violence kept Kurdish cities politically charged. In Turkey, cycles of reform, peace talks, collapse, arrests, and renewed fighting showed how hard it is to solve a national question through security policy alone. By 2026, the Kurdish question is active geopolitics. Drones cross mountains where old treaty maps once blurred. Militias and armies contest borderlands that diplomats barely understood a century ago. Oil fields, water routes, language rights, federal constitutions, counter-terror alliances, and memories of massacre all meet in the same unresolved space. The Treaty of Sèvres did not create Kurdish identity, and it did not create every Kurdish grievance. But Sèvres gave the modern struggle a reference point. Lausanne gave it a wound. Together they turned diplomacy into memory. A century later, the unfinished map remains, not because a treaty alone controls history, but because the questions it failed to settle never disappeared. Who has the right to decide a people's future? Can states built from empire survival without denying the nations inside them? And how long can security replace recognition? The ink of 1920 dried long ago. The conflict it exposed did not, and its questions still travel with every border crisis.